They say every empire begins with a lie. Mine began with a smile. When I close my eyes now, I can still hear the sound of that first party. The glasses clinking, the music pulsing like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. Everyone thought I was the girl who had it all figured out. The penthouse, the brand deals, the champagne smiles. But underneath the sequins and soft laughter, I was terrified. Because I knew. None of it was real. My name is Ava Cole, and 3 years ago I built one of the biggest luxury investment networks in America. At least that's what I told people. In truth, it was a Ponzi scheme wrapped in silk. And I was its designer, model, and illusionist. I grew up in Clearwater, Florida. My father fixed boats. My mother cleaned the houses of people who never remembered her name. We lived near the water but never owned a single thing that floated. I learned early that wealth wasn't just about money. It was about the illusion of effortlessness. At 17 I got my first taste of it. I was working at a beachfront cafe when a woman walked in. Linen dress, gold watch, skin that glowed like she owned the sun. She handed me her card with a tip that was bigger than my paycheck. "You have potential," she said. "Don't waste it here." Her name was Renee Darlington, a luxury realtor with a voice like champagne bubbles. She became my first mentor, or maybe my first mark. She taught me how to look successful before you ever were. "Confidence," she said, "is just debt you pay off later." By 22, I had reinvented myself. Clearwater Ava was gone. Now I was Ava Cole, brand consultant and investment broker. At least that's what my email signature said. I rented a studio apartment I couldn't afford and filled it with designer furniture I couldn't pronounce. I'd walk into hotel bars, order sparkling water with lime, pretend it was vodka tonic, and talk about clients, capital rounds, and luxury asset diversification. Most people didn't understand half the words, but that didn't matter. Confidence filled in the blanks. And that's when I met Ethan Rice, venture capitalist, 20 years older, married, and obsessed with the idea of building the next Soho house for the elite. He became my first investor. Or rather, my first believer. He handed me $250,000 after our second meeting, convinced I could turn exclusivity into equity. And I did. First, the plan was simple. I'd take money from early investors to build a curated luxury membership network, something between a private investment club and a high-end travel concierge. We'd buy into boutique hotels, vineyards, designer collaborations. Everyone wanted to be part of it. But I didn't have the infrastructure or the contacts or even a business license. So I did what came naturally. I faked it until it worked. I used Ethan's money to host exclusive launch parties in rented penthouses. I hired actors from Craigslist to pose as investors. I printed fake brochures and mocked up bank dashboards that showed returns. When the first quarterly report went out, the investors saw a 17% profit. In reality, it was just money from the next investor. That's the thing about a Ponzi scheme. It doesn't feel like a lie when everyone believes it. Over the next year, Cole Capital Luxe exploded. We had offices, real ones this time, in New York, Miami, and Dubai. We sponsored art fairs, fashion weeks, yacht shows. We had influencers posting about the Ava lifestyle. We sold aspiration, bottled it, and called it investment. And me. I became the face of it all. Magazine covers. Keynote speeches. Young female disruptor. They said I was redefining wealth for the digital generation. They didn't know I was redefining deception. Every dollar that came in kept another illusion alive. The cars, the staff, the rented villas. I told myself it was temporary, that once the real deals came through, I'd fix the books and make it all legitimate. But every success demanded a bigger show, a higher tower of cards. The first time I realized it was spiraling was in Paris. We were sponsoring a charity gala at the Ritz. I stood in a $10,000 gown, watching my investors dance under chandeliers that cost more than my parents' house. And across the room I saw Renee, my old mentor. She looked at me with something between pride and suspicion. "Ava," she said, her voice calm, "you're playing a dangerous game." Smiled. "What game isn't?" She sighed. "One day, someone will want to see the books." That night, for the first time, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the hotel window and watched Paris glitter like a promise I could never keep. The money came faster than ever. $2 million, then $5 million, then $10 million from a Saudi investor who thought we were managing luxury real estate portfolios. We weren't. We were managing faith. And I was the high priestess of make-believe. People always ask me how it felt, being at the center of it all. It felt like standing on a glass bridge, beautiful, terrifying, and destined to crack. Every new investment was another step closer to the fall. But until then, the view was spectacular. Champagne rained, cameras flashed, music thundered. And for a few glorious seconds I believed it all. That I deserved the crown. That I wasn't lying. That maybe, if I just kept moving fast enough, the truth would never catch me. But truth has a way of waiting. Doesn't chase you. Just watches until you stumble. And I was about to stumble hard. Great. Continuing seamlessly in the same cinematic, emotional tone. Here's the next section. Success is a drug. You tell yourself you can quit anytime. Until you can't. By the second year, Cole Capital Luxe had become a full-blown phenomenon. We weren't just an investment network anymore. We were a lifestyle brand. Our tagline was simple. Own the dream. People didn't care what we invested in anymore. They just wanted to be seen with us. At our events, in our photos, wearing our logo. It was luxury without substance. And the more hollow it became, the louder it echoed. We had clients in 23 countries. My face was on Forbes, 30 under 30. I gave TED Talks about the psychology of prestige. I built a cult, not with faith but with FOMO. I spent more time in airports than apartments. Private jets, champagne, red carpets. Every photo was curated, every caption calculated. If my life was going to burn down, at least it would look spectacular on the way. The more we grew, the more the illusion demanded to be fed. I had analysts now, people who believed they were working for a real fund. We'd hold investor meetings where I'd talk in circles about portfolio performance diversification, while the screens behind me showed fake dashboards I'd paid a developer to build. But somewhere deep down I started to feel it, the hum of instability like the vibration before a glass shatters. My CFO, Dylan, sweet, naive, brilliant Dylan, was the first to question it. "Ava," he said one night, tapping a spreadsheet. "These numbers don't make sense. We're showing profit without revenue. That's impossible." Smiled. "Nothing's impossible, Dylan. We're not selling numbers. We're selling confidence." He frowned. "Confidence doesn't balance books." I leaned forward. "Then stop balancing and start believing." He laughed nervously like he thought it was a joke. Maybe I did too. He didn't quit. He just stopped asking. And that was worse. That summer we threw our biggest event yet. The Luxe Legacy Gala in Monaco. Over 200 guests, royalty, influencers, CEOs. We rented an entire cliffside villa and covered it in white roses. Every minute of it was streamed online, sponsored by brands that didn't even know they were involved. At one point, an investor named Helena, old money, pearls, and precision, pulled me aside. "My dear, how do you generate such consistent returns in this market?" I looked her straight in the eye and said, "By investing in people who believe in me." She laughed. "I didn't. That's the thing about lies. They sound best when they're half true. I did invest in people. Their trust, their greed, their desire to belong. And they paid me handsomely for it. But I was starting to pay in another currency. Anxiety. Sleep vanished. My hands shook during meetings. I'd wake up at 3 a.m. and check 20 bank accounts, just to make sure the transfers had cleared. Every withdrawal was another second off the clock. And then came the call that would change everything. It was from the SEC. Not a full investigation, not yet. Just routine verification about our offshore accounts. Played it cool as always. Sent the documents, forged of course, and smiled my way through the follow-up call. They believed me. Or maybe they didn't care enough yet. But that night, as I sat in my penthouse looking down at the city, something cracked. For the first time I realized how thin the ice was. Every number, every promise, every photo, it all sat on a single truth I couldn't face. If I stopped moving, it would all come crashing down. Do you ever feel guilty? The therapist asked. I smiled politely. Guilty for what? Being successful. She looked at me, unamused. For pretending. I tilted my head. Aren't we all pretending? She didn't answer. She just wrote something in her notes. Probably. Classic narcissist. She wasn't wrong, but she wasn't right either. I didn't crave power. I craved validation. The applause was my oxygen. By year 3, we had over $120 million in active investments. Or at least that's what the report said. In reality, we had maybe 10 million left. The rest was gone, spent, shifted, recycled through shell companies and fake projects. Every dollar had a shadow, and those shadows were starting to move on their own. I told myself I'd fix it with one big deal, just one. And then I met Marcus Vail. He was the kind of man who entered a room like he owned the air. Tech billionaire. Private satellites. The type of person who thought laws were suggestions. He wanted in, not because he believed in the company but because he believed in me. You've got guts, he said. I like that. Let's build something global. He offered $50 million in expansion funding. And I said yes, because saying no had never been part of my vocabulary. That deal was the beginning of the end. It's funny. You never realize the fall has started until you're already in midair. I look back at those days now, and it feels like watching someone else's life. A stranger wearing my face, saying my words, chasing my ghosts. Every interview, every party, every investor handshake. They all blend into one endless reel of applause and anxiety. If I'd stopped then, maybe I could have saved something, my company, my reputation, maybe even myself. But I didn't. Because stopping meant admitting it was all a lie. And I was addicted to the performance. You can't fake forever, Renee had told me once. Smiled then. But now, as the city hummed below, I realized she was right. The truth wasn't coming. It was already here, waiting for me to look down. The bigger the illusion, the louder the silence before it breaks. When Marcus Vail wired the $50 million, something inside me shifted. Not relief, not pride, something closer to dread. That money wasn't salvation. It was acceleration. We expanded overnight. Coal Capital Luxe became Coal Global Holdings. We leased new offices, glass towers with marble floors and views so high they made you dizzy. I hired 100 new employees, half of whom thought we were a legitimate hedge fund. And for a while, even I started to believe the lie again. CBC called me the Oracle of Aesthetic Investing. Bloomberg said I was redefining the modern portfolio for the social elite. I smiled for every camera, wore a different designer for each interview, and spoke in crisp, meaningless sentences. But behind every photo shoot, the numbers were decaying. We were bleeding cash faster than we could fake it. Marcus kept asking for progress reports on Phase 2, an expansion into European luxury acquisitions. I didn't even know what that meant. So I hired people who did, and then ignored everything they told me. It's easier to build a lie when you drown it in data. You're a star, Ava, Marcus said over the headset. But stars burn out. Make sure yours doesn't. smiled. Don't worry. I plan to live forever. He laughed. That's what they all say. I didn't realize then that Marcus wasn't just an investor. He was a predator. He saw in me the same hunger he used to destroy others. And when my numbers started to slip, he was the first to smell blood. Ava, we have a problem. He dropped a file on my desk. Transfers, forged statements, a dozen accounts that didn't exist. These are fake, he said, voice shaking. Marcus's auditors are asking questions. I didn't look up. Then make them real. Ava, you can't just. Dylan. My voice cut like glass. Do you think any of this would exist if we waited for things to be real? He stared at me, not angry, just heartbroken. That's when I realized he still believed in me. And that was the cruelest part. Marcus's team flew in from Singapore. They wanted to review the accounts. I put on my best suit, painted on my calm, and smiled through an 8-hour interrogation. Every number they questioned, I countered with jargon. Every missing fund, I explained as restructuring. By the end, even they seemed uncertain. Because confidence, real, fearless confidence, is its own kind of hypnosis. But the moment they left, I vomited in the bathroom. It was the first time I felt my body betray the performance. People think fraud is about greed. It's not. It's about fear. Fear of being ordinary again. I'd built an empire out of other people's belief. If they stopped believing, I disappeared. So I doubled down. We launched the Velvet Portfolio, a fake luxury equity fund, targeting sustainable couture and fine art. It was a scam inside a scam, a glittering Russian doll of deceit. We made $30 million in 3 weeks. And then the news broke. Breaking news. FBI investigates luxury fund tied to alleged Ponzi activity. My name wasn't mentioned yet, but my stomach knew before my brain did. It was about us. One of our smaller affiliate partners, a consultant we'd hired to move funds offshore, had been arrested in London. And he was talking. Dylan came into my office, pale. Ava, they're going to find it. The shell companies. Everything. I looked at him, calm as ever. Then we get ahead of it. How? By giving them something to believe in. We gathered 50 of our biggest clients in the Manhattan penthouse. I wore white, symbolic, pure, untouchable. I stood on the balcony, city lights behind me, voice steady. You've all seen the headlines. Rumors. Ways. I built this company on trust, and I won't let anyone destroy what we've built together. Applause. Cheers. Phones recording. For a moment, I almost believed myself again. I promised them a special dividend payout within 60 days. A fabricated $20 million return to prove our liquidity. They cheered. They didn't know it was coming from their own investments, recycled through new deposits. The applause was deafening. And all I could think was, this is how Rome must have sounded the night before it burned. After that night, something inside me died. I smiled through interviews, signed fake reports, and posted filtered photos of champagne sunsets. But I knew. The end wasn't coming, it was already here. Then one morning I woke up to silence. No calls, no emails. Just the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. Unknown number. Answered. Ms. Cole, this is Agent Ramirez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We'd like to ask you a few questions. Time didn't slow down. Stop. The kind of stop where every memory collapses in on itself. The parties, the lies, the laughter. I sat there, still holding the phone, staring at the skyline. New York looked different that morning. Smaller somehow. Of course, I said finally, voice steady. Anything you need. Because what else could I say? The performance had finally reached its last act. People always ask me when I knew it was over. Was it that call? Was it when Dylan quit? Was it when Marcus sold his shares and vanished? Well, it was later, in the quiet that followed. When I realized I didn't remember who I'd been before the applause. When I understood that I hadn't built an empire. I'd built a mirror. And all I'd ever loved was my reflection in it. Desks cleared. Computers off. The logo on the glass wall peeled away like old skin. I stood there, heels clicking against marble, surrounded by ghosts of ambition. "You did good, Ava," I whispered to no one. "You almost made it real." The funny part, I almost believed it. Tone, cinematic, emotional, and reflective. Ava's world collapses, her lies catch up to her, and the silence after the storm feels louder than the chaos ever was. I'll make this segment self-contained, the final act of part 1, about 1,200 words, closing the arc of the rise of Ava Cole and setting the stage for part 2, the reckoning. They say downfall happens slowly, then all at once. For me it started with an email. A simple one. Just a forwarded message from a concerned investor to a journalist I'd had drinks with once. Subject line: "Something's not adding up." First I laughed. Everyone gets hate mail when they're on top. But then the story hit the Financial Daily. Not a headline. Just a small, curious piece buried halfway down the page. Luxury investment firm under scrutiny for unverified assets. Unverified assets. 2 words that sounded almost harmless. But they were a match, and my empire was made of gasoline. By noon my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. My CFO, Jordan, called every 5 minutes. Investors were pulling out. Our accounts, frozen for review. And my social media, the place where I sold the dream, turned into a battlefield. One comment read, "You stole my father's retirement fund." Another, "You're nothing but a dressed-up thief." I wanted to scream. But instead I sat in my office, the one with the marble desk and the view of the skyline, and watched the numbers disappear on my screen like sand washing off a shore. The first thing to go was the penthouse. Then the cars. Then the people. Luxury is a funny thing, it doesn't disappear, it evacuates. The laughter at dinners, the fake, "Darling, you're brilliant." The air kisses, gone overnight. I learned quickly that loyalty had an expiration date stamped with my net worth. The government agents came next. Polite, clinical, unbothered. They took files, drives, even the artwork on the walls. One of them paused by a painting, a huge gold canvas I'd bought in Paris. He looked at it, then at me, and said quietly, "It's amazing how something so empty can be worth so much." He wasn't talking about the painting. And I knew it. There's a moment in every empire when you realize it's already over. For me, it was the night I found myself sitting on the cold tile floor of my apartment. Not the penthouse, just a furnished rental, watching the city lights flicker through half-open blinds. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. My phone was full of unread messages, lawyers' voicemails, reporters begging for comment. I opened a bottle of cheap wine, the kind that stains your lips purple, and laughed so hard it hurt. Because somewhere between the $1 million lunches and the photo shoots and the fake tears for investors' family losses, I had actually started believing my own pitch. I told them I was helping people, building opportunity, creating wealth. But I was just building mirrors, one reflecting another, until none of it was real anymore. The next morning they came for me. It wasn't dramatic. No helicopters, no sirens. Just 2 quiet knocks and a badge in the doorway. "Ms. Cole," one said, "you're under investigation for securities fraud." The word fraud echoed in my head like a dropped glass. Not because I didn't expect it, but because for the first time I realized how small I actually was. You spend years convincing the world you're unstoppable, and in a moment you're just paperwork. They took me through the lobby, the same one where I used to sweep in with my designer heels and perfect hair, and suddenly every pair of eyes that used to light up went dark. No one smiled. No one said hello. It was like I'd already been erased, and they were just watching a ghost walk by. In the car, one of the agents asked quietly, "Why'd you do it?" I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I didn't know anymore. Was it greed? Ego? Or maybe it was fear, the kind that whispers if you stop running they'll see who you really are. The holding cell was gray, quiet, cold. I sat there and thought about my first investor, Mrs. Larkin, the sweet older woman who'd written me a handwritten note saying, "You remind me of my granddaughter. I believe in you." She gave me $40,000 from her savings. She said she wanted to see me change the world. And I did. Just not in the way she hoped. That night, I stared at my reflection in the cell window. No makeup. No designer anything. Just me, the person underneath the brand. And for the first time I felt something close to peace. Because there was nothing left to pretend for. No investors, no cameras, no masks. Just Ava Cole, the woman who built an empire out of charm and lies, and forgot who she was along the way. When they released me on bail weeks later, the headlines were brutal. The Luxe Liar. Queen of Debt. The Fall of Ava Cole. But beneath the noise, I started hearing something quieter. Question. Not how I did it, but why we all wanted to believe I could. Because I wasn't the only one selling a dream. They wanted the fantasy too. The promise that wealth could be effortless, beautiful, moral even. And I just gave it to them. When I walked out of court that day, the sky was a soft gray. The kind you only notice when you've stopped running. And I thought, maybe this is what freedom really feels like. Not the champagne, not the jets, not the cameras. Just silence, and the chance to finally tell the truth. I used to think my story was about success. Now I know it's about belief. And what happens when we start believing in the wrong things. Because the real crime wasn't stealing money. It was stealing trust. And I'll spend the rest of my life paying that back. They say prison changes you. That's not true. It only removes the audience. And you finally meet yourself without applause. The first night inside I couldn't sleep. The hum of fluorescent lights. The echo of doors locking. The sudden stillness after years of chaos. For the first time in forever, I wasn't managing anyone's perception. No investors to charm. No team to impress. No brand to polish. Just Ava Cole, inmate number 44719, staring at a ceiling that wouldn't stop humming. I thought I'd break. But I didn't. I adapted. Like I always did. The world outside devoured my story. Documentaries, podcasts, exposés. All with clever titles. The Queen of Smoke. Glamour and Guilt. They painted me as a monster in heels. A woman who seduced the markets and strangled them with a smile. Maybe they were right. But what they never understood was why it worked. Because the truth is, I never lied to people who didn't want to be lied to. They saw the cars, the diamonds, the penthouses, and they called it success. They didn't ask how. They just wanted to know if I could show them too. My lawyer told me to plead guilty. He said, "Ava, the evidence is overwhelming." He was right. But the truth. Evidence is only overwhelming if you don't know what wasn't found. So I signed the papers. I stood in court looking calm, contrite. I told the judge I was sorry. I told the public I'd lost everything. The cameras zoomed in. My voice cracked on cue. It was the best performance of my life. They sentenced me to 5 years. I served 21 months. Good behavior. Overcrowded facility. A model inmate. The irony didn't escape me. When I got out, the world had moved on. New scandals. New villains. My name was a ghost that trended once a year when someone released a new "Where is she now?" article. I didn't correct them. I didn't say a word. The truth is, silence has power. You can rebuild a life in silence. If you know where to look. I moved to Lisbon. New passport. New hair color. New version of me. The ocean there has a strange kind of mercy. It doesn't ask who you were, only who you're trying to be. I rented a small apartment above a cafe and started writing. Not a memoir. Just fragments. Lessons about illusions and faith and greed. People say confession is healing. But sometimes, confession is just another kind of performance. One evening I walked by a local gallery. Minimal white walls, quiet jazz. Inside, a painting stopped me cold. Gold streaks over black marble texture. It looked almost identical to the one the agents took from my office years ago. The tag read, "Private collection, anonymous donor." The owner said it was a recent acquisition, shipped from Zurich. I smiled, nodded, and bought a ticket for the next exhibition. That night I barely slept. Not from fear, from memory. Sometimes I wonder if justice and illusion are the same thing. The public needs closure, so they write an ending that feels right. A headline, a verdict, sentence. But truth is messier than that. I did terrible things. Broke laws. I hurt people. But I also learned something no prison can take away. Power doesn't vanish. Just changes form. Money is paper. Influence is oxygen. And I learned to breathe differently. A journalist tracked me down once. He said he wanted to hear my side. He looked nervous, like he expected me to slam the door. Instead, I offered him coffee. He asked the usual questions. Do you regret it? Did you ever hide money? Was it all worth it? I told him the truth. At least part of it. I said, regret is easy when you're safe. Harder when you're surviving. He didn't know what to make of that. When he left, he shook my hand, and I watched him glance at the watch on my wrist. Simple. Elegant. Limited edition. A model no one sells anymore. Sometimes on quiet mornings I check the markets. Old habit. Just watching numbers rise and fall like tides. And occasionally I see movements that don't make sense. Names of companies no one's ever heard of. Registered in places that don't exist on most maps. And I think to myself, someone out there learned from me. Maybe that's my real legacy. Not the scandal, not the shame, but the blueprint. They say people like me always get caught. Maybe they're right. Or maybe they only catch the ones who stop running. I still write letters to Mrs. Larkin sometimes. I never send them. I tell her I'm sorry. I tell her I paid back every cent I could. But I don't tell her about the painting in Lisbon. Or the quiet phone calls at 2 a.m. Or the account that's been growing slowly, quietly, under a different name. Because every story needs an ending. And maybe this isn't mine yet. If you asked me who I am now, I'd say I'm a woman who once believed she could sell dreams, and almost drowned in them. But I survived. And sometimes, survival looks a lot like success, just quieter. The ocean outside my window hums at night. Sounds like applause if you listen long enough. Maybe one day I'll tell the full story. Or maybe I already have. You'll just have to decide which parts were true.